In tonight's news edition, His Majesty the King and Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas signed a historic agreement in Amman asserting King Abdullah as the custodian of the holy sites in Jerusalem. Syrian rebels set 3 oil wells in the east of the country ablaze, causing a daily loss of nearly 5,000 barrels of oil and more than 50,000 cubic meters of gas. And Pope Francis calls for world harmony and peace on Easter Sunday Mass as 1.2 billion Catholics around the world celebrate the feast. Good evening and welcome to the news at 10. His Majesty the King and Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas signed in Amman today a historic agreement asserting King Abdullah as the custodian of the holy sites in Jerusalem. Under the provisions of the agreement, President Abbas reaffirms that His Majesty King Abdullah has full right to exert all legal efforts to safeguard and preserve holy sites in Jerusalem, namely Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. The mosque is defined as in the agreement as the entire Al-Haram Sharif, which comprises more than 140 dunums of land, making up the compound. The agreement helps Jordan and Palestinians exert efforts to protect Jerusalem and its holy sites from Israel's escalating Judaization practices and aims at protecting hundreds of Waqf properties endowed to Al-Aqsa Mosque. It also reaffirms the historic principles upon which Jordan and Palestinians are in agreement regarding Jerusalem and their common goal of defending the holy city, especially at such critical times when it faces dramatic changes as well as illegal changes to its authentic identity. Most importantly, the agreement reaffirms the status of East Jerusalem as Palestinian sovereign occupied territory and that all post-1967 Israeli aggression against Jerusalem are not recognized by any international or legal entity. Following the signing of the agreement, His Majesty the King held talks with the Palestinian president on efforts to reactivate Palestinian-Israeli negotiations and move the peace process forward. Farah Ajlouni has more.
At the royal offices in Hamad focused on ways to bring back the momentum to the Palestinian-Israeli peace process, despite the accelerating developments in the region. During the talks, attended by His Royal Highness Crown Prince Hussein, His Majesty reiterated Jordan's support to Palestinians and their efforts to achieve their legitimate rights, namely the establishment of an independent Palestinian state on national soil. Discussions also dealt with regional developments in the wake of U.S. President Barack Obama's Middle East tour and his meetings with Israeli and Palestinian officials, as well as talks with His Majesty the King in Amman. The two leaders also discussed ways to challenge Israel's policies that obstruct all peace efforts aimed at resolving the conflict based on a two-state solution. Abbas said after his meeting with His Majesty that the talks focused on His Majesty's upcoming visit to the United States to follow up on the U.S. President's recent visit to Jordan, Palestine and Israel.
It was important to hold this meeting to assess ongoing efforts and meetings related to the Palestinian issue in order to reach full coordination and a joint stand on various political and economic issues. There was also the issue of defending Al-Aqsa Mosque, and as you know, His Majesty the King has been entrusted with this important role of preserving Al-Aqsa and its compound.
The Palestinian president was greeted by a guard of honor on arrival to meet His Majesty at the royal offices in Hamad. Farah Ajlouni for the news at 10.
Separately, His Majesty met with the visiting Canadian Foreign Minister John Baird to discuss means of forging closer bilateral ties and review ongoing developments in the region. King Abdullah highlighted the need to bolster ties with Canada, namely in the economic and investment fields. The meeting also dealt with the situation in Syria and the importance of finding a comprehensive political solution that ends the bloodshed and preserves the unity of the country. His Majesty and Baird also discussed efforts to revive Mideast peace talks, leading to the establishment of a Palestinian state on the basis of a two-state solution. Baird voiced his country's appreciation of His Majesty's drive for peace in the region and his efforts for comprehensive reforms in the kingdom. Foreign Minister Nasser Judeh also met with the visiting Canadian Foreign Minister. Discussions focused on bilateral ties and regional developments, mainly the Syrian crisis and the Mideast peace process. Judeh and Baird also reviewed economic cooperation in light of a free trade agreement signed between Jordan and Canada, which came into effect in October of last year. They agreed on the need for a full implementation of the agreement to increase bilateral trade, utilizing Jordan as a gateway to regional states. The newly sworn-in cabinet held its first meeting, chaired by Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour, who urged his ministerial team to uphold the principles of transparency and openness in any forthcoming decision. He said the next phase should focus on achieving political reforms, which he said must be in parallel with the economic reforms envisioned by His Majesty the King. He also said the ministerial team will gradually include members of the lower house, noting that before the end of this year, a cabinet reshuffle will take place to introduce a number of deputies. Mansour urged his team to immediately embark on drawing up work plans and programs for their respective ministries and encouraged fieldwork to maintain open channels with citizens. Her Majesty Queen Rania urged Jordanian youth to take the initiative to improve their skills and build their capacity to secure job opportunities. Her Majesty met with board members and beneficiaries of Lothan Achievement Center Jordan, a non-profit organization that provides youngsters with internship opportunities and helps them find jobs while also contributing to their own communities. Queen Rania told a group of beneficiaries at the meeting that what sets them apart is that they did not wait for a job opportunity to come to them. Rather, they took the initiative and decided to improve their skills. The center was set up in 2008 in partnership with King Abdullah Fund for Development. One of its programs, Darb, which provides students with internship to gain work experience, has received applications from over 6,000 students. The center also believes that the youth must give back to their communities and expects beneficiaries to complete 18 hours of community service as part of the training program. Over to the crisis in Syria. Rebels set 3 oil wells in the east of the country ablaze, causing a daily loss of nearly 5,000 barrels of oil and 52,000 cubic meters of gas. Syrian state news agency said the oil wells are in Deir el-Zur province, much of which is in rebel hands, and that the damage followed despite them oversharing out the stolen oil. The news agency added that a total of 9 wells have been set on fire by the rebels, without saying when the other 6 were set ablaze. In the northern city of Aleppo, rebels took position around the international airport. Videos show rebels opening and receiving fire around the strategic site, which has been targeted for several weeks. The small northwestern town of Salma was also airstruck by government forces. Videos on the internet also showed the aftermath of an attack on the northeastern provincial capital, Raqqa. Meanwhile, Iranian Deputy Foreign Minister for Arab and African Affairs said his country wants to see a political solution to stop the violence in Syria. Hussein Amir Abdullahian made the remarks following talks with Secretary General of the Arab League, Nabil Arabi, in Cairo. He highlighted the importance of Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi's initiative on Syria, explaining that it was very similar to Iran's viewpoint on how to stop the bloodshed. Iran severed diplomatic ties with Egypt after signing peace treaty with Israel in 1979, but relations between and Tehran were renewed in the wake of President Morsi's election.
We agree together on an important point, which is that finding a solution will not be achieved through a security solution or even military solutions. Controlling borders and preventing entry of weapons into Syria is a very important factor to stop violence in the country.
Egypt's satirist and host of the weekly program Al-Barnamij, Bassem Youssef, turned himself into authorities for interrogation after the Prosecutor General ordered his arrest for insulting Egypt's President Mohamed Morsi. The National Salvation Front criticized the decision to arrest Youssef, noted for his imitation of the president's speeches and gestures, and Cairo residents said the arrest of a journalist should not be taking place after the revolution. As he arrived at Egypt's High Court this morning, Youssef made his way through a mass of cameramen and photographers. We get more in this report.
A media circus in downtown Cairo as Egypt's best-known political satirist turns himself into authorities. Bassem Youssef, in the middle of this crowd, surrendered Sunday after prosecutors ordered his arrest for allegedly insulting the country's Islamist president. Youssef is the host of Al-Barnamij, or The Show, a weekly comedy program that lampoons Egypt's political leaders. Broadcast during prime time on Friday, the program has a strong following. A frequent target of Youssef's has been Egypt's Mohamed Morsi, a long-time member of the Muslim Brotherhood who was elected president last year. Scores of Youssef's supporters greeted him on Sunday outside the downtown courthouse, railing against the arrest. They claim Morsi is cracking down on dissent, despite promising to usher in a new era of freedom following the revolution in 2011.
This is just an addition to all of the failed and repressive attempts that the ruling regime is carrying out, and they will fail the same way other attempts have failed previously.
A week ago, authorities also ordered the arrest of several opposition activists accused of inciting violence against Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood.
Youssef was later released on bail. Thousands of North Koreans gathered at squares in several cities for massive outdoor rallies in support of the army following tension on the Korean peninsula. The North state-run television KRT showed soldiers and workers in northern provinces marching down streets while holding up banners and chanting anti-US and South Korean slogans. Yesterday, North Korea said it was entering a state of war with South Korea, but the South brushed off the statement as little more than tough talk. The North has been threatening to attack the South and US military bases on an almost daily basis since the beginning of March, when US and South Korean militaries started routine drills that have been conducted for decades without incident. Pope Francis called for peace in the world during his first Easter Sunday address. He marked the holy occasion with a strong message of hope and optimism necessary for global harmony. 1.2 billion Catholics around the world celebrated with church services and festivities that culminate the Holy Week. Zainab Boussoufe has more.
It's Easter Sunday around the world when an 1.2 billion Catholics celebrate the resurrection of Jesus from the dead, 3 days after his crucifixion. At the Vatican and in a solemn yet joyful service at St. Peter's Square, an estimated 250,000 people attended Pope Francis's first Easter address, calling for world peace. He called for peace between Israelis and Palestinians, an end to the civil war in Syria, and political solutions to conflicts in several African countries, as well as to the crisis on the Korean peninsula.
Dear brothers and sisters in Rome and throughout the world, Happy Easter. Happy Easter.
In Jerusalem, hundreds of pilgrims arrived at the Old City's Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is considered one of Christianity's most sacred sites. Palestinians in the West Bank town of attended Easter Sunday prayers at the Church of Nativity, revered as the birthplace of Jesus. Queen Elizabeth II led the traditional Easter Sunday service at Windsor Castle, where she was presented with poises of flowers by children as she left the chapel. Zain Abu Sufa, News at 10.
Weeks of preparation for Easter would not be complete without the sweet taste of chocolate. Customers in Belgium flocked to buy gourmet chocolate eggs, rabbits, and bells at shops that did not disappoint. The shelves and display windows of Brussels chocolate shops were brimming with a variety of intricate creations that were eagerly snatched up by Easter shoppers. Belgium is famous for its mastery of chocolate and boasts more than 200 chocolate firms and more than 2,000 chocolate stores and museums. World number 1 Serena Williams beat Sharapova at the Sony Open for a record 6 times yesterday as she continued her dominance over her closest rival. Williams struggled with her serve in the first 2 sets, but eventually overcame her setbacks with a 4-6, 6-3, 6-love victory. The win makes Williams the 4th woman in the Open era to ever win the same WTA tournament 6 times, joining Martina Navratilova, Chris Evert, and Steffi Graf. Over to some NBA action. Dirk Nowitzki sank a 3-point shot with just under 3 seconds left to lift the Dallas Mavericks to a 198 win over the Chicago Bulls at the American Airlines Center. Nowitzki shot a fantastic 14 of 17 from the floor to finish with 35 points and hit 5 of his 6 3-point attempts for the Mavericks. The German also pulled in 7 rebounds and blocked a shot to help Dallas pull within a game of the Los Angeles Lakers for the final playoff spot in the Western Conference.
This boy is on fire. Woo, man. Blue all dang. Mike James can't guard Lou All. Here's Mayo. He finally scored.
And finally to the weather outlook. Relatively hot and dusty conditions tonight with southeasterly light winds. Tomorrow another rise in temperature is expected, raising the mercury to 8 degrees above seasonal average. Winds will be southwesterly moderate to fresh in the afternoon. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect hot and dusty conditions tomorrow with southerly moderate winds and slightly high seas. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. To end the news, here's a reminder of our top stories. His Majesty the King and Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas signed a historic agreement in Amman, asserting King Abdullah as the custodian of the holy sites in Jerusalem. Syrian rebels set 3 oil wells in the north of the country ablaze, causing a daily loss of nearly 5,000 barrels of oil and more than 50,000 cubic meters of gas. And Pope Francis calls for world harmony and peace on Easter Sunday Mass as 1.2 billion Catholics around the world celebrate the feast. With that, we come to the end of tonight's news. I'm Nancy Khair. Thank you for watching.